Welcome to the second episode of Your Relationship with Digital Technology. I'm Sneha Raj, an engineer by education and attitude, a technology enthusiast by nature, an entrepreneur by passion and choice.
I'm Sahitya Raj, a software engineer and programmer by education and passion, fitness enthusiast and influencer to experience oneness of body, mind, and soul, an entrepreneur at heart and in reality.
As we know, the beginning of the digital revolution dates back to the mid and late 20th century. Since then, we have had several significant inventions and innovations that contributed to this revolution. Rapid advancements to digital technology, its increased accessibility and affordability have tremendously transformed our society, the way we work, communicate, learn, and live. The current COVID-19 pandemic drove many businesses and individuals to migrate to digital for their immediate sustenance. However, is this a temporary migration or is it the true digital adoption that is required for digital transformation? To answer this question, we should assess the shift in the individual needs, behaviors, and their relationship with digital technology.
That's awesome, Sneha. Get set, go. I'm so excited to get this started as we have with us today someone who is really Scottish with a global mindset. He is a unique character and a natural performer. He's a 6 feet 5 inches, the tall Scottish guy, a serial Scottish entrepreneur and investor, strategist and innovator. He is regularly named in the list of 100 most influential British entrepreneurs. Also, one of the most influential figures in technology today. Yes, you all guessed it right. It is none other than Russell Dalgleish. Hearty welcome, Russell. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Please allow me to read a few lines about you, your work, and accomplishments. Russell is happy to speak about what he believes. His true passion, his why, is to help others to succeed. His inner capacity to do the right thing and resilience allowed him to accept both success and failure as simply milestones in his journey. So far, Russell has enjoyed the benefits of a highly successful international career in the technology sector. And now he focuses his efforts on supporting owners and boards of companies to devise and implement growth strategies to create shareholder value. In his earlier career, he has held board leadership positions with international companies achieving turnover more than 200 million pounds. His core areas of focus are leadership, innovation, entrepreneurship, and strategic thinking. He is a regular speaker at events on leadership in business and has spoken at conferences from Los Angeles to Abu Dhabi. Russell is the founding managing partner of the advisory group Exalta Capital Partners and founding chairman of Scottish Business Network, the global network supporting Scottish business leaders. Russell also holds multiple non executive and board advisory roles with fast growing businesses and organizations. He is a member of Scotland Trade Board chaired by Ivan Mackey, the Minister for Trade, Investment and Innovation. He is a member of Maserati list of business leaders who support the next generation of entrepreneurs. He is a member of the advisory board, Napier University Business School. In Scotland, he is a board member of the Institute of Directors, Scotland IS, and Merchant Company of Edinburgh. In London, he is the advisor to tech advocates, member of the Mentium Group, Griffin Club, and E2 Exchange. Internationally, he is with Talent Tech Labs New York and Asia Scotland Institute. Now, not all work. Since turning 50, he has developed a passion for endurance events and can often be found at weekends, mud splattered, clambering over obstacles, and still trying to keep up. However, enough can never be said about you, dear Russell. Once again, it is our pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us. Now, over to Sneha.
Wow, that's huge and impressive. We are extremely delighted to have you with us, Russell, and thank you for joining us today. I cannot wait to get started with you on our conversation about your relationship with digital technology and also get your valuable insights on the digital businesses in Scotland. So, to get started, I would like to, I would like you to take us back in time to the 20th century and help us revisit your childhood, education, and early career. Growing up in Selkirk, Scotland, as a kid, what was your relationship with digital technology?
Well, thank you so much. As you mentioned, I was born in a small town in Scotland, just south of the capital city of Edinburgh, but very much in the countryside. My family had been based there for 450 years, and it was very much a traditional life at the time. Um, Technology really came into my life through art and film, and I started to get exposed to what was possible in the world through technology. And this led me on to studying for a degree in technology in Edinburgh and then working in the field of technology, first in software and then in electronics and hardware, and now more in networks. So my whole life has been filled with the application of technology to the benefit of others.
So, you mentioned that you were inspired by technology application, in particularly in arts. So, could you please elaborate on
Yeah, sure.
that?
So uh, I, I really show my age here. So as a young man, my father would drive us for 40 miles every Saturday to the local city, which was the city of Edinburgh. So we would drive for 40 miles along a very windy road to go to a cinema and then share an experience with 1,000 other people. So it was really that whereby we would watch films from science fiction or adventure films, and that kind of spurred an idea about the fact that the world could be different than the world I'd been brought up in. So I suppose that inspired me to go on to study.
Okay, so you, like you said, you graduated in the year 1986 from Edinburgh Napier University with a degree in bachelor's degree in information technology. So now,
Yeah.
can we say that it's the science fiction movies which made you choose this field of education at that time?
Yes, I think so. It was a different time. So as a young person, I decided that I wanted to leave the town I was brought up in. And I worked out that there were really only two routes I could imagine to get out. And that was, well, not to get out, but to move on from. And one was to go into the army, or one was to go on to further education. So once I'd taken the decision that I preferred further education, it was a question of selecting what to study. And as I mentioned, because of my interest in technology, this seemed to be a way to go. You've got to remember, in 1982, even computers were seen as being an interesting thing rather than something that would become dominant in our society. So it was a bit of a hunch that this was a good thing to get into, and it's proved to be the correct decision. So I'm very fortunate.
So while you were studying at Edinburgh Napier University for your degree, what was the infrastructure, digital infrastructure that was available to you at that
It was, I suppose, mainframe computers and dumb terminals was what we worked on. Yeah, so we would have networked devices, but it was still very much uh, all the processing power was all centralized on mainframe computers. I think we started to see desktop computers coming out, and that gave some processing power, but it was very limited on the desktop itself.
time? Okay, so because now,
Then I think you have seen the evolution of the computer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's a isn't it a good thing that you have seen the evolution of the computer
From
itself?
the beginning.
So it's really interesting. I don't try to put a moral judgment on the progress that we make in our society. I just look for what's the application from what we've come up with. So I tend to always look on the positive side. So because I look positively at things, I always see the positivity that comes out of what we've gone on to develop. So
Yes.
yes, I would see, the fact that I can be sitting on a call in Scotland with both of you is, to me, an amazing indictment of how our technology can be used for the better.
Yes, absolutely. And you spent first 15 years of your career in the technology sector. You started as a software programmer, and then you moved on to hardware and electronics with different roles, multiple roles, and support, marketing, and sales. So at that time, how did the digital technology come into play in your professional life?
Um, so I discovered, I think there's a great lesson here for all of us, which is about discovering what we're actually good at and what we're interested in. And it's not necessarily about the things we study. So I discovered that I wasn't terribly interested in becoming a software engineer. I wasn't terribly interested in learning more about technology. I was interested in the application of technology, but I do have an engineer's mindset. So when someone sends me a new smartphone, for example, I will sit on the settings and switch all the settings on and off one by one to see what happens. And it's interesting because if you understand that's who you are, then if you start to use that in your career and your life, you will naturally succeed. So my personality means that I'm naturally the person that will adopt new technologies and try them out. I'm not attracted to brands. I'm more attracted to that value add that you can get. I'm also Scottish, so the value piece plays a major part in it as well. But I think if we look at what we've seen through technology, particularly over the last year in this time of COVID, has been very much about the use of technology as a communication tool. So all these technologies have existed for some time that we're using today, but there hadn't been the application, there hadn't been the reason to use them. So it was easier to go and meet someone rather than do a Zoom call. What COVID showed us was that we had to use the technology in order to communicate, and our lives have been changed by the experience. So I will have many more video calls than face-to-face meetings going forward than I did in a couple of years ago. And that'll become more and more the norm for me because it's better for me. I'm a better communicator in this way. And that's why I think it'll become much more important for me. What I also don't worry about is where technology is going and what happens next. I just wait and see what's coming along and then see where I can help people through the application of that technology.
So, what I'm curious to know more about is in those first 15 years of your career, where you were playing multiple roles, right, in support, marketing, and sales. What sort of technology was available to you at that time? Be it the hardware infrastructure or the communication tools, or how is it different from what we have today?
So I can remember probably, I don't know, 25 years ago getting my first laptop.
Yeah.
So that was really quite seismic, that change. So the idea of being able to use these tools while also being able to travel, so being remote from the office, that was quite because I'd been brought up in a generation where you went to work and sat in an office. So 25 years ago, someone gave me a laptop and then I didn't have to sit in an office ever again. We did because that was the norm, but suddenly we had a freedom there. So I think the release of a laptop was very important. I think secondly, it was the way the internet grew. So the internet provided connectivity at an instant level globally that we didn't have before. So technology then made the world a much more interesting place because Without technology, I would have to have bought a flight ticket, got my visa, and flown to India to meet with you to do this.
Yes.
The meeting would have been very different because you're interviewing me while I sit in my office here. So I'm naturally very relaxed. Whereas I would probably be much more tense, much more concerned, much more focused in a different way if we were meeting in person. So I think those are interesting aspects of technology and how it's developed. I think technology as well has allowed us to experience the world in a totally different way. So there are no geographical restrictions on how I grow my businesses today. So tomorrow I have a call with a company in Bangalore who I'm looking to do some work with. No, they focus on social media monitoring. So social media monitoring wasn't something that existed when I started my career. It wasn't even something that existed when social media started to appear. So that application of those different types of technology has been really important to me. Another aspect would be, I suppose, a personality about the fact you don't have to play by the rules. So everyone's developing their understanding of how technology works. So I will speak to someone who tells me they're a LinkedIn expert, and they will tell me how to use LinkedIn. And I'll continue to use LinkedIn the way I want to use LinkedIn, because there are no rules. There's no definition of how we are supposed to fill in these forms to capture this data. And that freedom from constraints is really interesting. So we've seen it most recently with TikTok. So TikTok as a phenomena has released people's artistic style to address huge populations of people, which they could never have done before. But they're not necessarily using TikTok in the way that it was assumed it would be used. And if I return to the smartphone, so when mobile telephony technology was getting developed, they had to introduce a way to send messages across networks to ensure the networks worked. And the way they did that was to introduce an engineering function, which was to allow you to send what we call text messages. So text messages were never part of the value proposition for the smartphone. They were an engineering function. But actually, we as individuals went, hey, this is useful. This is a very useful tool. So actually that became interesting, whereby we adopted the technology in an unusual way, and not in the way that necessarily the designers had chosen to do that. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us, is about the fact that you don't have to play by imaginary rules. No, you can work out how to do something. And you might be surprised that you find a niche or a gap in a market that you never realized existed. So I've done that with Scottish Business Network, which was, we discovered a niche in a market which we were able to exploit through technology, which was to bring together people who were Scottish across the world. Now, we never set out to do that. We just discovered the technology allowed us to do that. One of the main drivers for us was we found a piece of technology in France which allowed us to identify where there would be concentrations of Scottish people around the world by using the surname syntax. So by using particular surnames, you could identify where there was a likelihood there would be Scottish people there. We could then use products such as LinkedIn to reach out to those individuals and ask them if they wanted to get involved with what we're doing. So again, it's using technology in an unusual way. And I think that's that's a great way to live the world.
Yeah, I think I see your point. It's you mentioned something that's very important. It's about not just the technology alone. It's about how you apply the technology to it to your advantage. So
that's brilliant. I have to say, you've brilliantly summarised that, because that application of technology was my driver at how I changed my career. Because I was asked what I was for 5 years. I worked for a bank as a software engineer and then as a business analyst. And one day I was asked to attend a meeting with my manager, and my manager said that the bank were really delighted with me. I was getting on incredibly well, but they felt I should focus my career. So I could focus my career on being a banker or focus my career on being a software person. So I went home that night to decide how I wanted to move my career forward. I'd been there for just over 5 years, my first job out of college, out of university. And I went back in the next morning and resigned because I hadn't realized it before, but I didn't want to be a banker and I didn't want to be a software engineer. I wanted to do something different. And so that idea and it was my different thing was about that application of technology, not making it.
So what did you go on to be? What did you decide?
I worked in the electronics sector for several years, whereby I would work in what was called marketing or support or sales, but it was really working on the customer interface. So I would be the person who would go out to customers and I would talk to them about how they used the product and how they could use the product better. And you'd be called product engineer or marketing, or no, there was all these different terms to use for the time. And it was really interesting that I realized that I had an ability to grasp the value someone else was getting from the product, not the product itself. So I discovered that, no, we all assume that everyone sees the world through our eyes, but everyone sees a different world. And my world was about that. I wanted to know how someone used the product and what value they got from using that. So the best example would be I worked in the disk drive industry. So before memory came down in price, we had rotating media disk drives.
Yes.
And that was really interesting because I could see how these products could be used in a myriad of different ways. And my job was to try and understand the value the customer got from it. So the best example of that was I got asked to go to visit General Electric in the States, and they were testing disk drives as a key component within locomotives. So if the disk drive broke down, the locomotive stopped. So that was really interesting. So so it was only by going I could understand locomotive. This is a huge thing. You know, it's not just my laptop's not working. It's like there's 500 people can't go anywhere because the locomotive has stopped. And actually, you've blocked the entire East Coast, West Coast main line in the States if this goes wrong. So it was really interesting, that kind of different perception of technology through other people's eyes.
Oh, so you traveled internationally on work in the 90s itself, and right?
Yes. So the other major driver for me in my life, in addition to technology, is a huge desire to understand more about the world. So from the age of 18, I took every opportunity to travel. So initially I would travel in leisure. So my wife and I spent time, we'd get a train ticket for a month and travel across Europe during vacation time. And then after I left the bank, I realized that I was getting attracted to career opportunities which involved travel. So the more flying, the more I was interested. So that took me to spend, though always living in Scotland and raising our family here, I would spend a lot of my time traveling. And I started flying before the internet. So before the internet, what would happen is that you would leave your work and go to the airport and go to America for a week, and no one would speak to you from home. So there was no idea of being continually bothered by people instant messaging you or something through the night. You were basically, you would only be contacted by fax to the hotel if there was an emergency. So that got me the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the States and Canada, and a lot of time in South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan. And this gave me an amazing insight into what was happening in other parts of the world. And the fact that what I discovered was that there was a great similarity, because when I met people at the same stage in their career as me, they had the same worries. They had a family, they had a mortgage, they had a car to pay for. So that kind of made the world seem a much less foreign place or alien place than the way it was portrayed in the press. And, I spent a lot of time in what we call the Middle East, so Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh. And it was amazing there to meet people who were just like me, but just had different belief systems or different style of dress or a different way to live their life. And then finally, I got the chance to visit my favorite country in the entire world, which is India.
Wow.
So India is quite simply incredible. And in my perception is it's way misunderstood. So I traveled to India on several occasions. We set up a business in Delhi. I spent a lot of time in Bangalore. And what I loved about India was the energy. So, people talk to me about New York and London having a lot of energy, but nothing has the kind of energy you get in Delhi or in Bangalore or in Hyderabad. No, that pure joy. I see a lot of joy of life. I see the fact that all of your senses are affected by, just when the doors open at Delhi, this used to be the day, when the doors opened in Delhi, and then all of your senses would be struck by this incredible, vibrant environment. So I've always been drawn to India ever since then. And at the present moment, we're working through different Indian cities, appointing ambassadors for Scottish Business Network. After the US, it's my number one international target market. And the reason for that is India is a country with such incredible potential, such incredibly gifted talent based in India, and just on a scale that most of the West doesn't understand. We talk about China, but we don't talk about India. And that's a great shame, because India is just such an incredible place and such a market. Because of the historical links between India and the UK, there is such a desire to work together. And it was a real shame just last week when the British Prime Minister had to cancel his trip to India because of the rise in COVID rates. But once that gets back under control again, we hope to see a lot more business going that way. So, so quite honestly, India is the most incredible country I've ever been to. And I've been very fortunate. I've cycled across large parts of India as well as working there. And it's just a country I love dearly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much
for those words about India. Very much pleased with that. And so I have one question. So based on your international travel on work, so it so happens that be it any industry, when it comes to technology evolution as well, every country has its own history, timeline, a timeline of evolution. So while you were traveling, can you remember something where you were just awestruck or fascinated by something that you saw in a different country that was not available in Scotland, or the workplace that you were in Scotland?
Not really, because I'm based in a Western country in the UK. There was never really anything to surprise you on technology, because if we think about the fact that the US and Silicon Valley being one of the leading areas for technology, but we would have that on our television every night. So we would have that exposure to technology. It was more, all my travels was all about the people. The people were what surprised me. And what surprised me more than anything else was, and it's a real passion of mine, is trying to get people past their preconceptions. So we all have preconceptions that, people from Scotland will drink whiskey, and people from India will be living at 50 people in a house, and there'll be people working all over the world. People in China will be whatever we believe there. And when you actually get to visit, so I got a brilliant example. So a few years ago, I was asked to go and help with a trade visit by Scottish companies going to Shenzhen in China. And as part of the training for the trip, someone came along to teach me how to eat at a Chinese banquet. So the idea was that if you go to a Chinese banquet, you've got to use the cutlery in a certain order. You've got to do all this. And I said, but when I go to China, I go for a McDonald's with friends. And it's that kind of misconception, and we need to get over that. And that's what came about through traveling. So technology is funny for me, because technology, it's more the history of it rather than the modern. So to stand in Houston next to the Saturn V rocket in the museum, that was really incredible. Because the Apollo missions had been fundamental to me as a child. Because I lived through that. I've still got a vivid memory, or perhaps an imaginary memory, of sitting on my dad's knee when man landed on the moon. And no matter what's happened since then, nothing's ever gone wow to me like that moment. So that's been a real, I think that's been a grounder about technology. Everything else has followed, all of our technology today follows a straightforward path, was it's all a slight improvement on what came before. I think when we first got, I looked this out for you. So that's my ordered on day one iPad. So that's the very first version of the iPad, right? And to be honest, it doesn't really look terribly different from touch-based technology today. So yes, you can do more, but it's still basically the same. It's a portable television. So, and even if we think about the telephone, so the telephone is a really cool piece of technology and the processing power is incredible. But as far as a telephone, i.e. for voice communication, we've kind of had it 100 years. So I think that's a myth about technology as well. I think technology tends to be gradual improvements on products that were here before, rather than dramatic changes.
So then, can we say that you got your first personal computer, or was it a desktop or a laptop that you got, that you mentioned 25 years ago?
Question. I never had a computer at home until my work gave me a laptop.
Okay. So did you use that laptop for work alone, or did you get to do anything at home with it?
I think I would have used it almost exclusively for work initially. And then as the social networks came in off the back of the internet, you would then start using it more for other purposes.
So you can say that the emergence of, or the wide accessibility of internet and the emergence of social media changed your relationship with digital technology at home.
Yes. But even now, I don't play computer games. I don't use things like Facebook. So the technology that I use tends to almost exclusively be for work, because when I'm not in work and I'm doing something different, it doesn't really involve a computer. It's either with people, with friends, having communication, or it's taking part in athletic pursuits or traveling on holiday. So the technology is really interesting. So the technology to me is very much business orientated, and that's been the way. So my social media platform is LinkedIn. That's where I exist, and that's a work-based product.
So even in 2000s, if you see, compared to 90s, we had more accessibility to internet, and the mobile phones started to rise. And so did that affect in any way? The computer is something, okay, laptop, I agree that you used most of the time for work.
This is like old man's day out. I can't remember what was on my desk before there was a computer on my desk. So if you think about the office situation, we have a desk, we have a chair, and our knees go under the desk, and we type. And we type on a laptop, or we type on a desktop computer. And I'm struggling to remember what was on my desk before I had a computer on it. And I think it's because since I was 18, when I went to university or I went to work, I was working in technology. So there was a computer on my desk. It might have been a dumb terminal, but there was something there. And then when I graduated from university, I went to work in an IT center. So again, there was a computer there. And even when I moved over to doing more marketing, I was still given a dumb terminal. So it's really interesting. If you look at the journey of technology, the one coherent thing that's happened has been the screen and this. So the keyboard has remained consistent throughout. all right, so the keyboard's not connected to the computer by a wire, but it's still basically a keyboard.
Yeah.
And even when we look at our move to using more voice-based technology, we're not using it very much.
Right.
You know, not many people are actually writing emails by talking to their computer. So I think when we look at technology going forward, the human computer interface, I think, is the piece that will be the next fundamental change. So the whole thing about technology is you can only see step changes in hindsight. So the latest one, I presume, was Apple's products. So when Apple came out with the iPod and the iPhone and the iPad, was that really the last? Possibly that was the last major technology change. In application software, what's been really interesting for me is the use of applications to achieve things which have disrupted markets. So the best example for me as someone who would travel all the time would be applications which allowed me to book flights direct, or applications that allowed me to book trains direct. That's been a technological change that's given me an ability to do things I couldn't do before. So if you can imagine, historically, if I was flying to India, I would have gone to a travel agent and they would have told me what flight to get, and they would have taken a margin on that. Whereas now I would go onto Kayak or Skyscanner and I'll just book my flight to India. And it's really interesting how that ability to use technology has become very important. So if I, for example, if I need staples for my stapler, I'll press a button on Amazon and it'll arrive at my door tomorrow. So that's a kind of a fundamental change in the way that we interact. And we have to face it as well that these, we're starting to risk creating an entire generation of people who are not as familiar to operating in that way, or don't have a bank account so can't operate in that way. Whereas for others of us, it's becoming an absolute norm. I can't believe it. During lockdown, we ordered fish and chips from a fish and chip shop by an app, and someone brought the fish and chips to the door, and it honestly felt wrong. It felt, I don't like this experience. You have to go and queue up at a fish and chip shop to buy fish and chips. You can't have it delivered to the house. And
that's an interesting aspect. I think that's an interesting behavior. I would like to know more about it. So you didn't like it. You didn't like someone delivering the food at your doorstep. You would prefer being there, standing in the queue, and then experiencing that. So what makes you like that experience more than having the food delivered at your doorstep?
I think it's my nature. So I do a lot of leadership training where I help to develop leaders and help them to become the best leader they can be. And the starting point for that is understanding yourself. So I spent quite a lot of time trying to understand who Russell was, what drove Russell, and then tried to get Russell to do things that matched that. So in effect, I'm an advisor. So I separated myself from the analysis process. So I looked at what did Russell, that person over there, what did Russell really enjoy doing? So Russell really enjoyed traveling. Russell really enjoyed technology, really enjoyed talking. So what things could we get Russell to do that would allow him to do those things? And then in analysing that, we also discovered other things that I was quite good at that I hadn't realised. So I appeared to be very good at building communities. Now, I would never have seen myself, because I would have assumed to build a community, you need to be a very outgoing person, you need to have lots of friends, and you need to be able to persuade people to come and do what you want to do. And I discovered that's not the case. What you have to do is you have to spend a lot of time on data. You have to spend a lot of time learning how to communicate in different ways. So it's a different skill set. So anyone watching this, what I would ask you to do is understand what you're good at. And the best way to do that, absolutely the best way, is to work with someone else to ask the people that know you to tell you what they're good at. So what I did was I worked with a couple of undergraduates, and I got the undergraduates to work out a script, and then they would telephone or email people I knew to try and understand what was Russell actually good at. And the answers came back were really surprising because it wasn't the things I would imagine. So people said, we love working with Russell because he's so enthusiastic. Now, you can see me as being enthusiastic, but I just see me as being normal. So I can't see that enthusiasm, but other people could. And the reason is because people were comparing the experience with Russell to the experience of other people they worked with. And that's something we can't see. So it's really interesting to do that in self-analysis. And I would urge anyone to do that.
So I think from what you said, my understanding about Russell now is, so Russell, technology and people. So when Russell looks at technology, then it cannot be detached from people. So it will revolve around people. So whatever applications that he chooses to work with in his life, it does need to include people, not exclude people. So I think in that context, social media is something that you would have been using it a lot for work or personal life.
So I could see no purpose in social media for many years. It just seemed to be noise. And it was only when, as with most things in my life, when I discover a purpose and social media becomes a tool I can use to help me achieve that purpose or that goal, that's when it becomes useful. So it can be possible to look at me and say, well, Russell's quite often in the press, so Russell must like to be in the press. And actually, I've got no interest in being in the press. It's just the fact that by getting me in the press, it helps me to support the organisations that I like to work for. So it's a great way to promote things that interest me. So, for example, I work with Sake for Girls, which is a not-for-profit based in a slum in Delhi. And I help to promote them through social media because I've got a big following. So I will talk about the good work they do, and hopefully people will contribute money towards them. So it's quite interesting how you can use these tools. But actually, if I stopped those activities, I wouldn't use social media at all, because it's only because it helps me advance those causes.
So that means on the personal front, you're not really intrigued by social media, or it doesn't drive you to use social media. So how do you keep in touch with your friends and family? Not the close family that you live with every day, but the extended family or friends or anybody. How do you?
So my key tool is verbal. So it's typically, so my life involves telephone. So if I want to, so like my kids, for example, will WhatsApp me and I'll call them up. So that's kind of, I'm much more comfortable orally. So it's definitely telephone or WhatsApp or something if it's done verbally. But the idea about looking at pictures, it just doesn't fit my personality. It's like GIFs and things or emojis. It's not really something that I can emotionally engage with. And that's one of the key parts that we don't talk about enough with technology, is you have to emotionally engage with it. Our emotions have to be involved in the process with the technology. We must have a positive experience using the technology. If we don't have a positive experience, we won't use it.
Sure. Katya, you had some question, I think.
Yeah. One thing it has got to me very strongly is Russell is not fascinated by the technology alone, but it's the application and the value add that we have with the technology.
Yeah.
So whatever, even if it's a big technology, if it doesn't find the application or any value addition using it, then it's nothing for him.
Correct.
So finally, from this, what he has said is emotional things and the technology are kind of little distant for you. There is no emotional connectivity, emotional thing that is attached to technology. in your part. It's only all market or business side. You only see the business side of it in terms of business value addition. But
Yeah,
I
it's really
mean,
interesting because I'm at that age where you start thinking about retiring. So when I think about retiring, and to retire completely, I don't mean retire partially. So if I retired, I would have no use for I would have no use for any of the technology because I'm no longer. So if I retired completely and decided not to do any work at all, I would not use social media, laptops, email, or anything because there would be no purpose. For my family and communication with them, I would call them up. So it's really interesting trying to
yes,
understand your relationship with technology. Yeah.
that's so interesting.
interesting.
No, that's completely new perspective that we have got.
Absolutely.
A new experience for me as well.
I think proceeding, we have to take him to the pandemic effect.
Yeah.
The effect of pandemic on his relationship with the digital technology at work, as a service provider and as a customer. Did that introduce any new behaviors in you?
It's really difficult to see sometimes because a lot of things in our life we reinterpret in hindsight. So we build connections when we look back and we say, well, this happened, this happened, this happened because it was my plan to get to here. Whereas that's not really the way the world works. We waking up each day and new things happen, particularly if you're like me and you're an entrepreneur, because you're kind of hardwired to look for the opportunity. So you have to do that. And my interest is international opportunity, so I'm hardwired into that. I think the thing about technology at my age, I think it'll become more round about health. So I know as you get older, you're more susceptible to suffering from health problems. So I think pieces of technology strapped to me that monitor my blood level or my heart rate or things like that, I think those are things that will become are where I will interact with technology going forward.
So did you already use that technology during the lockdown period?
Well, it's really interesting because I've made more friends during lockdown than I've ever done in my life before, because it's given me the chance to sit and work my way through all the people I've ever met and then reach out to them through products such as Zoom or Teams or WhatsApp to actually talk with them. So I've been very fortunate. My family's not suffered too badly, and I appreciate that, the challenges that India is facing at the moment. But I've not suffered from isolation or anything because, I've been meeting new people just as I am today. Every single day this has been happening. And I've been very fortunate through this period, and it's led to a lot of new opportunities, just as I hope this will lead to a new opportunity.
So did you start using... Yeah, go ahead.
Russell, I think you like to hear about yourself from others, right? To know more about you. Maybe I think you have segregated technology and emotion, but hearing your experience during the COVID time, I think you are reinventing or exploring yourself. You have to explore yourself again because you have made more friends during the lockdown using the technology as a platform than you have done before. So you are emotionally connected to people on a technology as a platform. So I think you are connected, but you just maybe avoid it.
Probably it's this. He's connected to people regardless of the medium. So whether technology or no technology, he's connected with the people and he's connected with the emotions of the people. And technology is just a medium.
He's okay to get connected to people via technology.
So I think.
Now I should mention the fact that though the technology has allowed me to make these new connections around the world, I still have my deep-seated personal instincts that I can't stop, which is I would love to go to Hyderabad. I've just appointed we've just appointed an ambassador to Hyderabad for Scottish Business Network. So I have a deep-seated desire to travel. And particularly now, so after making so many new connections around the world, I've got a desire to actually go and meet people because I've got this. So it's quite, I think it all comes back to your personality. So your outlook on life. So I have a propensity to be positive. So I have a propensity to say something good will come from my actions. Now, a lot of the time it doesn't, but that doesn't stop me feeling that way. And I know, so I know how irritating I can be to work with because of that. Because I assume, no, we'll take this risk because I'm sure it'll work out. And that can be quite challenging to work with. But I'm 56 or 57 and I'm still here, so I'm going to keep doing it.
With your enthusiasm, I think you're still very young, and we extend a warm welcome to you to come to India anytime after the pandemic.
Yeah, now we also have the deep-seated desire to meet you in Hyderabad.
So well, I will definitely come and visit you. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. So now, so from my understanding, you've used video conferencing tools like Zoom, and you've explored Microsoft Teams as I think the other competitive products as well. So is there any other service that has gone digital you got to explore during the COVID times? One of them is, I think, the food delivery service. Is there anything else that
not really. No, I don't think anything else has come across my desk that I've gone, oh, I've got to use that. So I'm looking at my computer just now and there's nothing, it's still email, it's Zoom. I think the one thing I would say, and it's been really interesting looking at Zoom's success or Clubhouse, it's making it easy for the user. So that user interface, making it as simple as possible, that's been a real wake-up call. So I think technology companies have sometimes been a bit lazy and said, there's a user manual, work it out. Whereas we're now going, no, don't want to do that. It didn't work. Tried 3 buttons, didn't give me a good experience. I'm not doing it again. So I think that's been it. And I'm sure Zoom's success has been down to the fact that it was very easy to use.
And also, after a certain point, what happens is now, let's say most of the population is using Zoom, then the others would be forced to get on Zoom, whether the UI is comfortable or not. That's what happened with social media. Like, let's say I was not comfortable with Facebook initially. I didn't like the UI or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then now most of my friends are using Facebook. And if I have to stay connected, then I have to use Facebook, even though, let's say, I like Twitter more better than that. So it's just an example. I personally, now I'm not a Facebook fan these days.
So it's quite interesting because as someone who doesn't use Facebook, when I interact with Facebook, I find it the most complicated product in the world to use because I've not grown up with it. So it doesn't seem to have the bits in the right order so I could understand it. So it's just that perception. Another thing we've got to realize is that it's all going to change. So over the next few years, new products and new services will come along that we're all going to use.
Yes.
The consistent fact is that we'll still be people. So it's making it viable to people. But it's
okay, so just to summarize the effect the pandemic had on your relationship with digital technology, it's not much of a shift that I noticed, but probably increase in the time that you have spent meeting online. So you did meet people online before, but I think COVID increased the time that you spent on meeting people online. So if that's the summary, can we conclude it that way? Like that's how it affected. And going forward, what is that you would like to continue or carry forward post-pandemic?
So I have a philosophy, which is I live each day within the 24 hours. So I'm here today and I'm about to go and get my lunch, and then I've got a board meeting this afternoon, and then I'll watch some football tonight. And then what happens tomorrow will happen. So I don't worry about the next day. I just focus on today, and that's been my philosophy for a long time. So and it's stood me in good stead for radical change, such as the pandemic. So the pandemic, as I, like everyone else, was very concerned for a period of time, and it was a great change to my life. And then I got used to it, and then I got on with it. So
awesome. And
Maybe I
any
think
quick
post-pandemic, we have to talk to him and understand what did he carry. We can't talk about the future, but maybe post-pandemic, we have to talk to him to know what did he carry from the pandemic time.
Yeah, we'll talk to him in the future, definitely in the near future, hoping that the pandemic will recover from the pandemic very soon. And any quick insights on the digital businesses in Scotland?
So it's a very exciting time for Scotland and the UK as a whole. So we've changed our relationship with Europe through Brexit. We're about to host our largest ever event, which will be the UN conference in November in Glasgow. We are starting to show a rise in innovation in Scotland and innovation to address global problems. So I think it's a great time to do business in Scotland, and we would love to encourage more Indian companies or companies from across the world to not just come to London, but to come to Scotland as well.
So how is Scotland looking at digital technology for the future of businesses and their growth?
I think it's the same as across the world. People are looking for things that they're passionate about and problems they see in the world and trying to come up with solutions. So, for example, we use a product called Hey Summit from an Edinburgh company which hosts all our events. And that's something that didn't exist before, and it's fabulous. And it's allowed us to really move forward with things.
Yeah. So we have quick rapid fire round now. So it'll be quick questions and quick answers from you.
Okay.
So the first question is, when did you get your first mobile phone and which one?
Can't remember. 1990 something.
Okay.
Your favorite digital device?
It's probably my Amazon Fire tablet.
Okay.
Yeah. Which app do you open most frequently?
LinkedIn.
Okay. So, which app do you spend most of your time on?
Email.
Oh,
your favorite social media?
I think it's only LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
We know the answer. Yeah.
So, do you shop online? If yes, what is that app which you use
the most?
Do you shop online?
Yes, Amazon.
Amazon. Okay.
Your favorite entertainment app?
I think Netflix.
Okay.
So I'll give you a few words. For each word, just name the app or the service that's offered digitally, which comes first to your mind when you hear the word. So the first word is productive.
Airtable.
Helpful.
Helpful. Google.
Creative.
Creative.
None.
Entertainment.
BBC iPlayer.
Okay. Life made easy.
Oh, strikingly.
Okay. And the last word is gossip.
Gossip. Telephone.
Good one. Wow.
I like my gossip live.
Good one. And we have really enjoyed the conversation with you, Russell. And we're very much delighted that we had this conversation with you. And we love your perspectives on your relationship with digital technology.
We've learned really new perspectives in our conversation.
And thank you very much
so much
for your time. Thank you very much for your time. And we look forward to many more opportunities of meeting you and working with you in the future.
It's been such a delight to meet you all, and great fun to do this.
Yeah.
And if anyone's watching it and wants to get in touch, just drop me a note. Thank you both very much now. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Have a great day. Bye.
Great day.